Hello, YouTube. This is Al once again for Kindred Souls of Brooklyn. And also, hello to my website. It actually went live tonight, so if you haven't already checked it out, please check it out. Kindred Souls of Brooklyn on the World Wide Web. Tonight, I want to talk about something very different that I had never really thought about. Now, I like history, and of course, as you can see in the background, I have two of my GI Joes back there, and they're going to come into play in a few minutes, so to speak. But I never realized until tonight that I was thinking about this how GI Joe was actually a barometer for the Vietnam War, and I never really realized this. Now, not to go into a big history lesson on Vietnam and all that, but it's just amazing how popular culture and popular opinion really affected this character. Now, for those who don't know, America's involvement in Vietnam technically started in 1946 when we kind of supported the French because it was a French colony, and after World War II, the French didn't have much of anything left after the Nazis went in and pretty much decimated everything. So we sold them military hardware. The French couldn't get their colony back. They left in 1958, and one way or another, we started getting more of an active role in Vietnam. And by 1964, we had kind of really gotten in there pretty deep. So, anyway, G.I. Joe was invented back in 1964. Now, the funny part of this whole thing is that initially the war was viewed positively by America because it was our way of stopping communism. If you have watched any movies like The Green Berets, where they talk about how many weapons were coming in from different communist countries like Czechoslovakia and Russia and China, and how America had to step in, and we did. And during that evolution, of course, President Kennedy was the one who brought us into Vietnam, and essentially, and President Kennedy was the one who created the Peace Corps. But a lot of people don't know too. He also created the Green Berets. Um, you know, as a kid, that was literally the first record that I ever bought was The Ballad of the Green Berets by Sergeant Barry Sadler. Great song, love it to this day. But I started thinking, I said, wow, how much G.I. Joe is a barometer of that war? Because essentially, when the war started, of course, again, it was very popular opinion supported it. But then by the end of the 60s, the country itself started protesting the war. And the funny part of this whole thing was that if you look at that G.I. Joe to the far right, that G.I. Joe pretty much exemplified what you saw in G.I. Joe from 1964 to 1970. Now, I was born in 65, and of course, all my early G.I. Joes were war themed. You know, sailors, Air Force, Marines, Army, Special Forces. But as the war became unpopular in America, G.I. Joe actually turned into an adventure guy. And I had never realized this until about tonight, how I was looking on eBay and I was just looking at G.I. Joes and the values and the prices and things like that. And I realized that, and I remembered back to all the G.I. Joes that I bought when I was a little bit older, or rather my parents bought for me. And what happened was when the war became unpopular in 1970, GI Joe became GI Joe Adventure Team. So what that essentially meant was that you no longer saw GI Joe with weapons or with anything army related or military related. He became an archaeologist. He was a scuba diver. He was a safari guy. He was a hunter. I mean, the only weapons you really saw were maybe a hunting rifle or something like that. But you never saw anything military. It was extremely, extremely rare. And this Adventure Team G.I. Joe thing went on till about 1976. And the Vietnam War ended pretty much in 1975. We had pulled a lot of our troops out, and officially it ended in May of 1975 when the communists rolled into Saigon pretty much unopposed because we pretty much pulled out everything at that point. But had never realized how much G.I. Joe symbolized how America's feeling changed toward that war. And just from my personal opinion, not to get too political on this channel, but one thing I will say, whether you're for the war or against the war, I think one mistake that people made in the 60s and the 70s was they really gave the soldiers coming home a very hard time. I remember this as a kid. I remember people in the neighborhood who we knew I remember a guy came back to the neighborhood and he he was told not to wear his uniform. He came back because his mother had passed away, and he was told not to wear his uniform because of the protests at JFK Airport. That was terrible. So I think my point here is that whether you support the war or you don't support a war or a situation or even what's going on right now, you have to support the soldiers. The soldiers are there doing a job. They're not politicians. They're told to go where they have to go. They do their job bravely. So I think that was the mistake that this country made back in the 70s was, all right, if the war wasn't popular or we shouldn't have been in there, not to get political, yes or no, the mistake we made was not supporting our soldiers. And I think finally, at this point in time, they are getting respect. But it was very sad back then that they weren't given the proper respect that they deserved, especially from some of the folks who didn't really support the war. So anyway, that's my little thing tonight. But again, if you look at that GI Joe on the left right there, right behind me, he's dressed in a safari outfit. And of course, the one on the right is the Vietnam era soldier dressed in full camo and Kevlar and everything else. So I just thought that was a little interesting. I'd never thought about that before. I hope you enjoyed this. Please leave me some comments of what you think. I will say though, and again, I wasn't for or against the whole adventure team thing, but after that, GI Joes pretty much went away up until Operation Desert Storm when my son was born, and they came back again. But I will say that there was two major improvements made to GI Joe back when the Adventure Team thing came around, and that was the real life hair that was on the GI Joes, and also the Kung Fu grip. And tell you a funny quick story. The first GI Joe that I had with Kung Fu grip, I mean, it really smelled like strong rubber when you took it out of the box. My dog chewed both the hands off the GI Joe. I woke up one day and the hands were chewed off. I couldn't believe it. So my mom and dad, being great parents that they were, they got me a new GI Joe, and I actually kept the old one. My mother fixed the old one too. But pretty amazing. But I hope you enjoyed this video. Thanks for tuning in. I really appreciate all your support. And everyone, have a nice, peaceful night. See you real soon. Thank you. Bye-bye.